Yeah, so I want to get on here and I want to talk about how my video that I made addressing my discrepancies with uh, Sergeant Willie Pete on that video, my issue with Sergeant William Peter, and a bloke named Kaptan Solo, who I believe Sergeant Willie Pete mentions in a lot of his videos. He made a comment on that video, my issue with Sergeant William Peter, and he asked me a couple of questions. Um, I already addressed the issue with how the Europeans ended up with, like the Pacific Islands, New Zealand, Australia, Russia, and the Americas because they used smallpox to get it. Because, if you look at like with the Native Americans in North America, they were going around raiding them and getting it over the white fellas and that. So they had to use smallpox to get the United States. In Australia, Indigenous Australians were using guerrilla warfare to get it over the white people. And if you watch a documentary series, um, it's on the History Channel. I think it's New Zealand Wars. It talks about the Maoris. And the Maoris even beat the British Army, which was undefeated at the time. So they were really good at warfare. So what the white people in New Zealand done was they used, because the Maoris were always warring with each other, they used the people that would go on their side to give them all the secrets and all that. And then when they got enough Maltese and white people together to go against the main Maltese, then they ended up winning and getting New Zealand from there. So they use all kinds of deceptive tricks. Look at Brazil. When the Spanish went there, the indigenous people killed them all. When the Spanish tried to kill all of them, so the Portuguese went in there, giving them gifts like scissors and trinkets and all that. And for the indigenous people to keep getting them, they'd have to work for the Portuguese. And while they were working for them, they ended up giving them disease. So that's how they ended up with Brazil. And then they went to Angola and pumped slaves from there. So, white supremacists use all kinds of methods used all kinds of methods to get those indigenous lands. And that's why those indigenous numbers are so small because of that, particularly with the impact of disease. So, yeah. And his second question was talking about language barriers between different indigenous peoples. Yes, we did have different language barriers. And don't forget that we mostly stayed in our area. We never knew of a big continent and all that. So you got to keep that in mind. And, to organise a counter-attack at the time would have been definitely difficult, yes, with that, especially when you didn't know how the white people were thinking and what they were planning and what they had in their arsenal and what they had at their disposal with the disease. That was all sprung up as a surprise to us. So, yeah. I also wanted to mention as well, the white fellas killed a lot of the buffaloes in North America to starve the Native Americans. And here in Australia, we've had it where, particularly in the middle of Australia, that the white fellas, were using their herds and all that with animals like cows and horses who kept drinking the water holes, and that would, you know, uh, starve out our people and that as well. And you dried up all the land and the vegetation, a lot of it. That's why Australia, in the middle of Australia, is so barren. That's why North Africa and Arabia and all that is barren, because all them camels. And people don't talk about that as well. So yeah, also check out my video, my thoughts on the dinosaur age. It might go into what I think about that as well. Um, but yeah, You know, Captain Solo also mentioned in the comment, uh, talking about a position of displacement. He's interested in me breaking that down. Now, don't forget, your history is you were stolen from Africa, and the difference between like in the United States and other places, because I've had an African bloke that I know out here in Australia. He was from Ghana, and he was saying that all the blackfellas in the Caribbean and Brazil and all them, they're all African because they've got the culture. Where in the United States, they're American because they don't have the culture. They've got an American culture. And this black person from the United States that came out here was talking about it, how the white supremacists were different in the United States compared to the other places where they went out of their way to deny the culture in the United States and deny practicing of the language and all that. So, and not only that, but like the British took them all over in one swoop, where in Brazil they kept bringing them over. So the new arrivals kept the culture going with the blackfellas that were already there in Brazil. So there's a big difference with that as well. So, and displacement basically means you don't know who your original tribe is, or your language, or which part of Africa you came from, or whatever. So because of that, you are talking about it from, an American point of view, where, under white supremacy in the United States, that, they made racial constructs like white, black, Hispanic, Asian, even though they're not, original, they're constructs. That's how people have been deemed with their identification after they made them constructs. Where people who were indigenous to those places and all that still identify with their indigenous heritage and culture and tribal groups and all that. So it's very different, you know. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's not the same, and I think uh, the point I was trying to get at with Sergeant Willie Pete is the fact that he was basically talking about it from what I believe was an idealistic point of view, where we can't just drop thousands of years of our identity just to come together all on all in one go, just to fight one enemy. So yeah, and another thing I wanted to say is Sergeant Willie Pete left a comment in that video saying about the Chinese all came together. Don't forget the British said at one time when I was giving a speech at an international gathering or forum or something like that. He goes, they said to the other Europeans and Japanese and all that. They said, "Do you want to break this up?" Talking about China. "Do you want to break this up like we did Africa?" And because they didn't, it's coming back to bite them, because as you see after the communist one and all that, they've got a strong sense of nationalism. And as you see, Chinese are doing everything they can to overtake everyone, and it's coming back to bite the Europeans hard. Also, don't forget about the Boxer Rebellion and how the imperialist powers at the time all tried to take over China. So you might want to look into that as well. So let's not get ahead there. And you're talking about Han Chinese, that happened centuries ago, like with that coming together. I'm aware of that. But, the North and South weren't united, and took them 20 years just to conquer the South, and the Mongolians and that, so, big difference there. So, look, I agree that a lot of people should have a code where we can put our differences aside and come together. That's what the white supremacists do. They don't like each other at a personal level, but they can drop all that in an instance and get on code through osmosis to go and fight what they would deem as a greater threat. Other groups do it too, the immigrant groups and all that. They've got that. I understand. you know but yeah, I think eventually that's going in that direction. I think that I'm talking about Indigenous Australian point of view. I think that's going in that direction with us. but we're still divided on other things, like religion and subculture and sexual orientation, all them kind of intersectionalities, as the feminists would say. Um, so, it is difficult. Um, it's also difficult when, the impact of colonialism and how we've taken on the traits of our oppressor, and it's hard to, do away with all of that. Then the impact of drug and alcohol abuse, broken families, um, and all that. And then another thing I notice is that, like when you know things about each other, you know how to fuck each other over, and you want to avoid each other because of that. I'm aware of all of that as well. But I think that people don't want to dwell on negative all the time. I think with us Indigenous Australians, we are trying to come together and trying to get on code and fight a greater fight. With the Indigenous people in Africa, I think that it's going to be a little bit difficult. But I think that with a growing population, you'll have enough people that'll have that consciousness, and that'll have that point of view, and that would want to try to achieve that at some point, knowing that like if they're going to pick us out alone, then it's going to be harder to fight them. But if we come together, then it's going to be easier to fend them off, kind of thing. The thing is that like what we're seeing with the Russians and Chinese, is they're coming in trying to be the friend and then trying to exploit, similar to what the other Europeans and Arabs did in the beginning. Um, and different generations go through different experiences, and probably not aware of what happened in the past and all that. Um, but yeah, you're seeing it in South Africa, like with the blackfellas getting on code there. Um, so yeah, but yeah, what my main point is that rather than speculating on how to do it or what could be or whatever, because I can't really speak on Africa's behalf as much. But what I really wanted to point out is you can't just expect people to have thousands of years of identity and just to drop that, and just to say, oh, we're just all black all of a sudden, because who's going to control how that works, you know? So there you go. Um, any other questions that Sergeant Willie Pete or Captain Solo has? Leave a comment, and yeah, I could get back to you on that as well. Thanks for your time.